Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Julia Sadi. I serve as Customer Engagement Specialist here at Sentinel. A big part of my role on the client experience team is ensuring that we are setting and meeting and hopefully exceeding your expectations for service. I also help champion our FLY program, which stands for Financial Literacy for You. So I'm really excited to be talking with you about financial wellness. It can be a big and daunting topic, but hopefully Ryan and I can shed some light into why you need this and how to build or even improve your program.
Thanks, Julia. My name is Ryan Campagna. I'm one of the senior retirement plan leaders here at Sentinel Benefits. Really excited to take you through this presentation today with Julia's assistance. In another couple of weeks, I'm actually going to have my 19th anniversary at Sentinel, and I spend most of my time at the firm working with plan sponsors, helping them to implement fiduciary best practices, which includes education and wellness programs to plan participants. So really the goal of this brief webinar is to help those organizations that have a retirement plan in place, but perhaps don't have a formal wellness program, or targeted towards those that have one, but perhaps haven't shown it the attention it might deserve. This webinar is going to really go through what we find is some helpful tips and tricks to help you either optimize your current program or really enhance the one you have today. So we're certainly excited to do that, and looking forward to spending a few moments with you today. So, I think one of the things that it would be remiss if I didn't start with is kind of why are these programs so important, and perhaps why now? I don't think it's any surprise to anybody that these financial worries will certainly take a toll on your people. We've all heard the statistics about what's going on in with working men and women these days. 54% of your employees tend to be stressed out about their situation. As a result of that, it's been estimated that about 13 hours per month is the average time that financially stressed employees spend worrying about these things at work. These statistics are about a year or two old. If you add into the fact of what we're dealing now in our current environment with really high inflation, really high energy prices, a stock market that's been very filled with turmoil over the past 2 years, it certainly is not making anybody's jobs easier. So we certainly know it's something that employees are worried about, and it's certainly something that distracts them when they're trying to do their job in the workforce. And it certainly affects the company as well. As higher compensation and benefit costs are associated with longer tenure employees, that certainly can have a detrimental effect to employees' bottom line. As employers resist the tendency to move people throughout the workforce and people continue to work longer, it can block trajectory of younger folks trying to get bonuses and promotions and things like that. And it certainly also increases absenteeism. And I think an umbrella fact around all of this is how does this affect your workplace culture? So I think there's a direct impact about the financial toll of those employees, what employers are doing to combat that, and then what does that really say about your culture as a whole? So we certainly feel that there's no better time than now to really take advantage of dusting off your program, or perhaps giving it a little bit of a new look. So, we'd like to encourage folks to really think about, from a foundational standpoint, what they really set out to accomplish with a financial wellness program in the first place. So, questions to perhaps ask yourself is, what is your current benefits philosophy today? How do benefits fit into your world of retaining and recruiting your workforce? Does your benefits philosophy work in sync with what you feel your corporate culture is, or more importantly, perhaps where you'd like it to be? So I think those are really important questions to ask yourself. Being able to define your workforce and create awareness amongst them, I think, is one of the important aspects that we're really going to start with, which I'm going to come back to in a few seconds. We've worked with a lot of different clients to help determine how you may want to approach different segments of your workforce. And there's a lot of different schools of thought as to how you'd perhaps like to do that. Where are they today, and where will they be in 5, 10, 15 years? So those are definitely things that should take some consideration. Before starting a program, have you looked and examined your benefits data? There's a tremendous amount of information available to you within some really basic retirement plan statistical information about enrollment, about deferral rates, the prevalency of loans and things like that. Benchmarking those statistics against a benchmarking group would be a really helpful way to determine what are the areas that you might need to focus on as an organization. And then finally, are you ready to commit? Oftentimes, when we speak with new clients, we find that they might have a wellness program simply because a retirement plan provider has some component of employee interaction built within their service deliverable. And where that's great, and I think, it's certainly better than nothing, it really doesn't have any formal structure around it. And we've often found that many organizations haven't really committed to seeing it through and making sure they're taking advantage of everything that has to offer. So I think there's some really important things we're going to encourage everybody to take a look at as we dive a little bit deeper. So we wanted to provide everybody some really helpful hints and tips as to how they might make this process a little easier. Sentinels use a pretty straightforward process when we're dealing with employees and trying to optimize these programs, and it's really based on the 3 A's that we coined. So it's awareness, action, and access. And we're going to go through each of these 3. I'm going to cover awareness, and Julie is going to take some of the action and access steps that some really great organizations and some best practices that you can take advantage of. So awareness, how do you create awareness within the organization to make sure your employees are addressing their financial needs? Actually, Julia, you can go back. So how do we create that awareness? When I first started at Sentinel, I used to do a lot of enrollment presentations, and there was always the same group of people that would always sit in the very front row within that presentation. Those aren't necessarily the ones that I was worried about because they were attentive, asking a lot of questions, and were really interested. There was the same group of people that would always sit in the back. They would never ask any questions, kind of absorb the information, but you never really knew where they stood. And then we certainly know there's organizations that have employees that don't even come to the meetings, and those are the ones that we want to try to create this new sense of awareness to make sure they're gravitating towards the information that's being pushed out through some of these programs. As far as the action goes, you got to make it easy. You got to make it very easy for people to pull the trigger and make some decisions on these things, which I think is a critical component. And then access. After the fact, how do you support these employees, and how do you make sure they're getting the support that they deserve after a presentation or a webinar might be ended? Thanks, Julia. And as far as awareness goes, I think it's really critical that you have to take into consideration where your employees are today. And there's a couple different ways that we look at doing that. You have to meet people where they are. Now, we certainly know that there's all shapes and sizes within an organization, and there's a couple different ways to take a look at that. I'm going to take you through 2 different ideas of when you're addressing a workforce, what are some things to take into consideration when you're trying to create webinar topics or trying to create that awareness within an organization. So one of them, which might be the one that kind of comes to mind first, is from a generational standpoint. I think as you're looking at the different generations in the workforce, clearly there'd be different interest within different topics across the various groups today. I think all of these various groups are going to digest information in a little bit of a different way. They even want to be communicated to in a little bit of a different way. So we have the baby boomers, which today are about 15% of the total workforce. Those folks would be very interested in things like healthcare and time to retirement. Some of our most popular webinars and seminars for that particular market are how Social Security benefits might fit into their current retirement plan benefits, how Medicare might fit in. So those are some pretty common things. To contrast that with the millennials and the Gen Zs, those are different generational groups that have a tremendous amount of interest in things like student debt loan and student debt repayment. So we've rolled out a lot of really useful seminars and webinars to those clients that really wanted to focus in on those folks. Giving an update on the Secure Act 2.0, which, if passed, has an element that would allow plan sponsors to be making matching contributions into a 401k as people pay off their student loans. So there's countless other examples of what we're able to do from that standpoint, but the idea is that when you're embarking on these wellness offerings, Don't just necessarily say, oh, my record keeper wants to send out this seminar on this topic. Go through the process of understanding the various groups you're catering to and what topics you think they could appreciate the most. So again, there's countless examples, but these are just a few of them. I had talked to a client about that idea and creating kind of that generational approach. And to be very honest, they didn't like that approach. They said, well, you know what, Ryan, all of our baby boomers don't fit the same mold. And I think that's an obvious statement. Yes, some of them are more well off than others. Some of them might have other struggles than perhaps others. So they didn't like the idea when we were talking to them about the needs of the organization from a generational standpoint. So we had a thoughtful conversation with them, and we said, okay, well, if you want us to kind of address the needs, how would you like us to adopt it? And we talked about just doing it by age, which was probably too close to doing it by generation. So what we did is we came up with this idea of creating these personas. So we're certainly not going to pretend like these 4 personas are the only types of people they have within an organization, but they tried to take different elements of their business and try to create essentially like a financial profile of these folks. Now, again, we're not painting a broad brush and saying that one person would clearly fit into these categories, but they came up with a group of their employees that they considered are struggling from an income point of view. They were among the lowest paid employees within their particular workforce, and many of them actually had to hold second jobs in addition to this core job they were hired for. So programs to consider for those types of folks were basic financial skills training, credit card and debt counseling, even referrals to some government agencies and government programs to make sure they were taking and addressing those needs. Ultimately, I think with this particular client, we came up with about 6 different profiles. To give you kind of an idea of like the opposite end of the spectrum, they had some that they called, they have spending challenges. Some of them were building savings. And then finally, they had these folks that they considered, oh, these are the extra income type persona, which was a subsection of their employee group that were high earners among the top 20%, considered themselves financially literate. Most of them owned a home and were looking for different ways to save in taxes. The long story short of thinking it like this is, as a result of creating these personas amongst their workforce, we were able to identify very particular programs and next steps to consider to address these various hypothetical personas. So the bottom line is what worked really well for one client didn't necessarily work from another. We had to take a little of a different route to get there, but ultimately land in a place where we felt like we were able to move the dial and put people in a good position.
Thank you, Ryan. So now you've heard a little bit about some different characteristics of employee populations and the importance of personalization. What I'm going to tackle under action is how do you actually put a plan into place? The spoiler here is there is no one-size-fits-all option, but I'm going to share some ideas. So I think of it as kind of 2 ways to build a program. You can either put the onus on your employees, something you're probably doing already that Ryan mentioned, things like hosting an open enrollment meeting. Maybe you couple that with an email campaign. You're sharing all of the available benefits. You're letting people know how to make these decisions, and then it's driven by each employee. The other option, and what I'd like to focus on today, is how do you direct behaviors proactively? In other words, what are some choices that you can make for your employees? A lot of the time, these conversations become about behaviors on the part of an individual, but I think it's important to ask yourself, what can I be doing as an employer, as HR, as a decision maker, before an employee has to decide anything? So very simply, just to begin, if you're a decision maker, you have a say in what benefits are being offered. Very basic concept, but it's crucial to nail this. So that leads into the next bit here, which is, how do I know what my employees want and need? You can take it the quantitative approach or qualitative. So quantitatively, as we mentioned earlier, use the data you have to your advantage. Review the utilization. What plans are most used? What plans are maybe not being touched at all? And I think that can help prioritize your budget and really just what you're talking about, what you're promoting. And then from a qualitative standpoint, whether formally or informally, I think it's very important to survey your population to find out, do you have any gaps? How are people feeling? Sometimes people aren't even aware or maybe can't verbalize what benefit that they want, but they can give clues. So you might hear things like, I'm concerned about saving for my children's future, or I'm unsure if I can retire. And the last piece here is around what features can you automate? So we live in a highly technology-driven world, and automation can be a lot of different things. I'm going to speak in the scope of retirement plans. So things like automatic enrollment, which is if a participant does not enroll in a plan or does not elect an amount to save, this feature automatically puts them into the plan at a certain dollar amount or percentage. In tandem with that, auto escalation, similar concept, it's going to bump that participant up a certain amount on a regular basis. Both of those are really great options for an unengaged participant to get them on the right foot and set them up to save. Another piece to this, you may have heard about managed accounts. It's a way to, it's a highly personalized way to invest that looks at a participant's entire financial picture. So I want to talk a little bit about hyper-personalization, and really what that means is how do you deliver the most relevant content for each person? So this is what I receive as a Sentinel employee every year, and I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes talking about how it helps me. So this is a sample of my personal flight plan. It's a 4-page document that lays out my financial health. So it's looking at things like my date of birth, my income, retirement balance, and it's going to take all that information and describe how that impacts my life. You'll see things like budgeting formulas with real numbers of like, what should I be saving? What should my monthly expenses look like? It's going to tell me, as you can see on the top there, if I continue to save for retirement as I'm doing today, what will that look like when I'm 67? There's a really interesting theory called disconnect bias that essentially younger generations don't want to save for a stranger because they find it hard to visualize themselves ever retiring, and therefore they don't connect with their future selves and they're not saving as they should be. So by projecting what this is actually going to look like at each age, it makes it real and makes it personal. Using real numbers is a way to hyper-personalize. Another really cool part about this, 72% of people don't have a written financial plan. Because my employer proactively sent me this flight plan, I have now become part of that minority without needing to take any action. And this is going to jumpstart, it's going to get my juices flowing, it's going to jumpstart my financial conversations. So that's the action piece. You now have the interest, which is the A, awareness. You have a strong program built with action. Access is the last puzzle piece, and that is, how will you support your employees ongoing? We all know that financial decisions are occurring more often than just during open enrollment or just once a year. It can be monthly, it can be daily. So having access to some sort of financial professional year-round is really critical. Now, Ryan and I can give you the guidance, but here are some more questions that will help you determine what does access look like in your organization. So what is my communication strategy? This applies to both in the method, meaning is it via email, Zoom, in person? Do these communications come from me, HR, CEO, my provider? What information can I simplify? What needs more explanation? I think a good rule of thumb is get rid of the jargon, keep it really simple, and then as we spoke about before, hyper-personalize. The second piece here is, where are my people located? This is important both in what medium, meaning do I need to email them? Do I need to be on Zoom? Can we be in person? It also includes what languages do I need to accommodate for? Where is my information going to be posted? Is it in a common area? Is it the intranet? And the last bit here is, how do my people prefer to learn? Do they want to be live in a group environment with someone doing a presentation and describing all of their benefits? Do they want to sit down one-on-one with a financial professional on their own timeline? Is there the opportunity to use technology or gamification or certain apps I think one really cool silver lining to the pandemic and to having more of a hybrid workforce is the ability to bring spouses to these conversations. Found a really interesting statistic. 87% of people who say that their marriage is great also say that their spouse, they and their spouse work together to set long-term goals for their money. So it's no secret that marriage and money, go right hand in hand. And I think the ability to be virtual provides the opportunity to involve others in these conversations. And obviously it's very much happening. So one way that we tie in technology and that you can absolutely use is, for example, Ryan's in the office today, I'm at home. This that I'm showing you on the screen here is called Schedule Once. It's the ability for me to see my financial planner's calendar. I can sit down with my spouse, pick a date and time, looking at Ross's calendar that works for us, and thoroughly prepare for my meeting without really even needing to speak with Ross. I can just pick his time, pick his calendar. So there are plenty of ways to weave in technology without losing that human experience. So we went through that really quickly, and the intention was so we have plenty of time for questions here. I will say that if we don't get to your question in the next 10 minutes or so, Ryan and I will absolutely follow up. We'll share our information. But just in closing, I wanted to say, financial wellness does look different for everyone. You've now heard how financial worries can result in stress, absenteeism, reduced productivity. Building a financial wellness program is not just checking a box. At the end of the day, you really have a responsibility to your employees to set them up for success and to provide support. So Ryan and I didn't want to just ramble on. We did want to give you something very tangible to take away and either begin these conversations or continue these conversations personalized for your company. So because you attended the session, you're going to receive this guide to evaluating your program. And this includes kind of a series of questions about your philosophy, about your workforce, plan data, some other considerations that are going to help you explore what does your company, what do your employees actually need from a wellness standpoint. So I'll give it just like a minute or so for some more questions to roll in. But again, thank you so much for joining us. This is Ryan and I's information.
All right, I see a few questions rolling in here. We can get started on the first one, and I'll keep tabs on if any more come in. So first up, we have there are thousands of financial advisors out there. What is the cost difference for employees who venture outside the organization for their financial planning needs versus employees who use their employer's programs?
Interesting question. Thank you, Kendall. There's a couple different ways you could answer this. I mean, if the person is alluding to the idea of like getting work financial plans through an employer versus on their own, that is a pretty profound difference. So one of the reasons why Sentinel created our financial wellness program and our foundational financial plans for plan sponsors is because the average participant often has a difficult time getting a financial plan for one of two reasons. One, it can be cost prohibitive. It would be easy to say that an average financial plan is anywhere from $500 to $2,500. That's if you can get an advisor to want to create one for you. And that leads to kind of the second part that can make it challenging is oftentimes based on the business model of a financial planner, many of them want to work with people that have investable assets of a certain level or over a certain level. So even if you're willing to pay for a financial plan, you might not be getting the attention that you might otherwise deserve because your investable assets aren't really where the advisor wants you to be, because almost all of them are looking for a longer term relationship. So creating this program, we wanted to make it really easy for participants that wouldn't otherwise have access to a plan to be able to receive one from their employer. To specifically answer the question, it would differ depending on the structure of the program within each of our clients, but it would be an absolute fraction of the cost, even considerably less than the low end that I mentioned to the plan sponsor or to the participant. So it's a fraction of the cost, and again, it's meant to be a foundational plan, which is covering the baseline planning elements for all employees. So.
Awesome. Have you seen widespread interest and adoption of these programs? And why do you think it's happening now?
Julia, I think I'll grab that one as well. We have seen much more information and interest within these programs now. I mean, I think like a lot of things within the benefit space, it typically starts with the larger market plans and larger market opportunities. So, years ago, the Fortune 500 companies started to adopting these, and they've started becoming more and more prevalent down market, where you'll have employees that have 50 to 1,000 employees, as low as 50. Think about different ways where they're trying to retain and recruit employees. So offering kind of the meat and potatoes benefit plans is just simply a table stakes now. They have to be able to do that, and they're looking for creative ways to offer additional programs. And this one really fits in nicely. So it's great from a culture standpoint, because a lot of plan sponsors are talking about holistic well-being, and the financial well-being piece of this does really fit in nicely. So I think from that standpoint, the timing is accurate, the timing is critical. And of course, with a lot of the stuff that's going on in the world today, that only exacerbates the needs for a program like this. So.
Thank you. Okay, let's see what's next. How can I increase participation and general awareness of financial wellness programs? How should we measure the success of these programs?
I can take this one. This is kind of a three-parter, so Brian, feel free to chime in. I think as far as increasing awareness, we talked about it a little bit, hyper-personalization, right? Why do I care if it's not about me or for me? I think it's also repeated communications. This is not a one and done promotion. You can't send one email and hope that it's going to change lives. It needs to happen regularly. It needs to happen in different mediums. As far as how do we increase participation, that I could talk about that for a very long time, but I will just say you need to allocate the appropriate dollars, but even more so, allocate some type of champion. Allocate someone that will own the program and that will really promote it. And then measuring success. So measuring success is incredibly important. What I will say is this can be really difficult to track. You can, see who visits apps, see who attends educational sessions, who's scheduling meetings, who's bumping up their retirement plan savings, but it can be challenging to measure long-term impact. And I think that's where the qualitative surveying comes in, right? Asking your employees, how are they feeling about their finances? What are stress levels? But yeah, at the end of the day, I think measuring should be ongoing, and you should tweak and adjust every single time you measure your program.
Just to add one thing onto that answer that Julia just provided is, and it kind of goes back to the idea of a champion, and I'm going to tie that into the different generations that we were talking about a few minutes ago. One of the things that I found interesting is that baby boomer generation that has a long history of being very hardworking, has a tremendous amount of knowledge to share, that are retiring more and more day to day. That we found with a lot of our clients has a lot of employees that are still in the workforce today that want to be able to pass that wisdom down to some younger folks within the organization. So there's a lot of baby boomers out there that have become champions for financial wellness plans because they want to help their coworkers essentially not make perhaps some of the mistakes that they made, or learn from their mistakes and kind of pass that down to them. So I found that interesting across a couple of clients, that's kind of that phenomenon.